The air in the grand ballroom was worth more than a city block thick with perfume and power. Josie Turner stood 7 months pregnant as her husband's mistress, Zara Vance, whispered poison in her ear. "He's just waiting for you to drop the inconvenience so he can be with me," Zara hissed her red nails, gesturing towards Josie's belly. But Zara made one fatal mistake. She thought the fight was over the man. She had no idea Josie was about to drag her entire world into the light, and it wasn't the husband who would save the day. The penthouse on Park Avenue was less a home and more a museum of Damien Turner's success. It was all glass, steel, and cold imported Italian marble that seemed to leach the warmth from Josie's bare feet, even in August. At 7 months pregnant, Josie felt like a ghost haunting its own exquisite prison. The baby, a boy they had provisionally named Arthur, was a restless kicker, a constant living reminder of a bond that felt on her husband's side to be dissolving into icy obligation. Damien Turner was not a man. He was a corporation. Turner Industries, a monolith of logistics and tech, was his true wife. Josie Hayes, a former brilliant corporate lawyer from a family of good old money, rather than filthy New World riches, had been, she now understood, a strategic merger. He had needed her poise, her pedigree, and her intelligence to smooth the rough edges of his cutthroat reputation. And for a time it had worked. Their first 2 years were a whirlwind of genuine affection, or at least a very convincing simulation of it. He'd admired her mind, her ability to spar with him over contractual loopholes and market projections. Then he'd promoted her, as he'd joked, to CEO of the Turner legacy. The moment the pregnancy was confirmed, he'd pulled away. The late nights became all-nighters. The board dinners became urgent off-site crises. The scent that clung to his bespoke suits changed. Josie wore Jo Malone's peony and blush suede. The new scent was something sharper, more aggressive. Chanel No. 5, a classic but not hers. Tonight was the night that mattered most in their shared public life, the Turner Foundation Gala. It was the crowning event of New York's social calendar, a night where Damien laundered his ruthless corporate image through 9-figure charitable donations. It was to be held at the Orion Grand Ballroom, a space so opulent it made palaces look quaint. Josie was fastening the clasp of a diamond necklace, the Turner Star, a cold, heavy piece he'd gifted her, when Damien entered their dressing room. He was already in his tuxedo, a flawless, commanding presence. "Josie," he said, his voice the smooth, clipped baritone he used with his board. "You're not ready. We're due on the floor in 20. "I just needed a moment," she said, not turning from the mirror. He adjusted his bow tie, his eyes meeting hers in the reflection. "Are you feeling unwell again? Genevieve will be there. She'll be displeased if you look pale." His mother, Genevieve Turner, was the iron matriarch who still held a significant portion of the company's voting shares. She viewed Josie's pregnancy with a grim, dynastic satisfaction. "I'm fine, Damien. Just tired." He walked up behind her. His hands rested on her shoulders, but there was no warmth in them. It was a pose, something they'd done for Vogue. "Good. Tonight is important. The Kestrel acquisition is in its final stages. I need everyone to see solidarity. Stability." "The Kestrel acquisition," Josie repeated. That was Zara Vance's project. Zara. The name tasted like ash. Zara Vance was Damien's brilliant raven-haired vice president of acquisitions. She was a shark in couture, a woman who'd clawed her way up from nothing, and who Josie knew with chilling certainty was the source of the Chanel No. 5. For the past 3 months, Josie had not been idle. She had not been weeping into cashmere pillows. She had been the lawyer she was trained to be. It started with the scent. Then a single onyx cufflink she didn't recognize in his travel bag. Then the late-night calls he took on the terrace, his voice a low, intimate murmur she hadn't heard directed at her in a year. She had used her dormant credentials to access the family's private accounts. Not the ones Damien knew about, but the real trust accounts managed by her father's ancient, dusty firm, Hayes Legal. She hadn't been looking for infidelity. She'd been preparing for a divorce. She'd been trying to secure her child's future. She had hired a private investigator, a discreet man named Sullivan, who specialized in corporate malfeasance. The photos he'd provided were all the proof she needed Damien and Zara emerging from a private suite at the Carlisle. Damien and Zara sharing a brandy at a darkened bar. Zara's hand on his thumb stroking her knuckles. But then Josie had dug deeper. Driven by a cold, precise rage, she'd started looking into Zara's star project, the $800 million Kestrel acquisition. Zara had built her reputation on it. Damien praised her killer instinct. Josie, with her retired legal mind, found the first thread in less than an hour. A shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. A bank transfer that had been split into 3 separate smaller wire payments, all routed through a subsidiary in Singapore. All personally signed off by Zara Vance. It wasn't just an affair, it was a heist. Zara wasn't just sleeping with her husband, she was robbing him. And Damien, blinded by his own ego and her flattery, was letting her do it. "Is something wrong, Josie?" Damien asked, his reflection's eyes narrowing. Josie forced a smile. The pain in her heart was a physical, crushing weight, but she compartmentalized it. This was a case. She was preparing for trial. "No, darling," she said, turning to face him. She placed a hand on her stomach, a gesture of maternal fragility that was pure performance. "Just the baby. He's kicking. He must be excited for his first gala." Damien's face softened just a fraction. The legacy was his one true blind spot. "Right. Well, let's not keep our public waiting." He offered his arm. She took it, her fingers gripping the fine wool of his jacket. He felt the coldness of her diamond ring, but he didn't feel the ice in her veins. He thought she was a fragile, pregnant wife, slightly overwhelmed. He had no idea he was walking into an execution, and that she was the one holding the axe. The Orion Grand Ballroom was a sea of glittering sharks. Light from 3 dozen crystal chandeliers fractured across billions of dollars worth of diamond stocks and political influence. Every camera flash was a small explosion capturing the smiling, predatory faces of New York's elite. Senator Davenport was laughing with Julian Rothschild. A tech billionaire Josie despised was holding court by the champagne fountain. Damien and Josie Turner made their entrance. They were the main event. He was the king, and she his pregnant queen. The narrative was perfect. The murmurs were appreciative. "Mr. Turner! Mrs. Turner!" the paparazzi yelled from the velvet rope. Damien smiled a magnetic billion-dollar gesture. He placed a proprietary hand on the small of Josie's back, just above the swell of their child. "A wonderful evening," he projected. "We're so glad you could join us in supporting the Foundation's work." Josie smiled. She let her gaze sweep the room, serene and graceful. She was looking for one person. She found her near the main stage, holding a glass of champagne, surrounded by a coterie of fawning junior executives. Zara Vance. She was a vision in blood red, a custom Alexander McQueen dress that clung to her like a second skin. It was a defiant, flagrant statement. One did not wear red to a charity gala. It was seen as attention-seeking. But Zara didn't care. The dress was a challenge. It screamed, "Look at me. I am the one who matters." Her black hair was sleek, her makeup flawless. And as Damien guided Josie into the room, Zara's eyes met Josie's across the expanse of marble. There was no guilt in that gaze. There was no fear. There was only victory. A smug, predatory confidence that turned Josie's stomach to stone. "Damien, darling," a voice trilled. It was Genevieve Turner, his mother. She was a terrifying woman, sculpted by decades of social warfare, wearing a formidable sapphire necklace. "And Josie, you made it." "Of course, Genevieve," Josie said, her voice soft. "I wouldn't miss it." Genevieve grunted her eyes, scanning Josie's navy blue custom maternity gown. "Appropriate. You look... well." "Damien, I need a word," Genevieve said, already pulling him away. "The senator is waffling on that zoning ordinance." Damien gave Josie a perfunctory squeeze on the arm. "Go, mingle. I'll find you." And just like that, Josie was alone. Adrift in a room full of people who saw her as an accessory. She moved slowly, gracefully, accepting congratulations on the baby from people whose names she barely remembered. She was on autopilot, her mind a cold, whirring computer running calculations. She was halfway to the terrace, seeking a moment of quiet, when a voice stopped her. "Josie, you look absolutely glowing." Josie turned. Zara Vance stood before her, her smile as sharp as cut glass. The scent of Chanel No. 5 was overpowering. "Zara," Josie said, her voice perfectly level. "That's a very bold dress." "Thank you," Zara purred. "I believe in bold moves. They're the only ones that get results." She took a delicate sip of her champagne. "Damien loves it. He said it reminds him of a rare orchid he once saw in Singapore." It was a deliberate, targeted strike. Josie knew from Damien's credit card statements that their Singapore trip had been 2 months ago. "How lovely for you," Josie said, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. Zara's eyes followed the movement, and her smile widened, becoming something ugly. "You really are very pregnant, aren't you? It must be exhausting, carrying all that extra weight. It just drains the life right out of you." "It's a small price to pay," Josie said. "Is it?" Zara tilted her head. "I find pregnancy so biological, so primitive. I've always believed a woman's legacy should be what she builds," she said, gesturing to the ballroom, "not what she breeds." The insult was so profound, so venomous, that Josie felt the air leave her lungs. The people around them, sensing the subtle shift in energy, began to quiet down their conversations, fading as they subtly turned to watch. A confrontation between the wife and the work wife was the best kind of entertainment. "That's an interesting perspective." Josie managed her mind racing. "Not yet. Don't let her provoke you. Not here. Wait for the stage." "It's just the truth," Zara said, stepping a little closer. "Damien, he's a builder. He needs a partner who can build with him, not an incubator. You were a good lawyer, I heard. A killer. It's a shame you gave all that up to become this." She gestured to Josie from her swollen stomach to her tired eyes. "You should be careful, Zara. Josie said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You're speaking very freely. Why shouldn't I? Zara laughed, a low, throaty sound. Everyone knows. Everyone in this room knows that your marriage is a shell, a holding pattern. He's just waiting for you to serve your purpose. She leaned in her perfume, a suffocating cloud. He told me you know. He said he respects your lineage. But he desires me. My mind. My ambition. My everything else. Josie stood, frozen. She could feel the eyes on her. The pitying looks, the speculative whispers. This was what Zara wanted. To prove that she held all the power. To humiliate Josie on her own territory. He's a very vigorous man, Zara continued, her voice dripping with insinuation. He has needs that a delicate woman like you clearly can't meet right now, or perhaps ever again. Josie had to end this. She turned to walk away. Oh, Josie, Zara called out, her voice suddenly loud and clear, silencing the nearest 10 tables. I almost forgot. Congratulations. Josie stopped her back to the room. She turned slowly. Zara Vance raised her champagne glass in a mock toast, a cruel, triumphant smirk on her face. I do hope it's his. The music-alive string quartet playing something by Vivaldi seemed to warp and fade. The chatter of the ballroom died. There was only the ringing in Josie's ears and the sight of Zara Vance standing there like a matador who had just delivered the killing blow. What did you say? Josie's voice was barely a breath. Zara's smirk didn't waver. She knew she had her audience. This was her stage now. She was no longer just the VP. She was the star. I just said, Zara repeated, projecting for the benefit of Senator Davenport's horrified wife. I hope the baby is Damien's. It's just, well, you two have been so distant. This was the ultimate mockery. To not only steal her husband, but to slander her fidelity, to attack the one pure thing she had left her child. You're implying I've been unfaithful? Josie asked. The question was a block of ice. I'm not implying anything, darling, Zara said, taking a casual step closer. She was acting for the crowd, playing the part of a concerned friend. I'm just saying, you've seemed so lonely, and Damien has been so busy, working with me. Late nights, early mornings. We've been practically inseparable, finalizing the Kestrel deal. A man that busy. Well, a woman gets needs. You are, Josie said, even more repulsive than I imagined. Zara laughed. Oh, stop being so puritanical, Josie. We're all adults. You got your storybook wedding. You got your trust fund. You're getting the heir. I'm getting the rest. The man. The power. The real Turner Empire. It seems like a fair trade to me. You think this is a trade? I know it is. Zara leaned in her voice, dropping back to a conspiratorial hiss, though everyone could still see her smug confidence. He's tired of you, Josie. He's tired of the good old money judgment. He's tired of your sad, pale face. He wants fire. He wants ambition. He wants someone who isn't afraid to get their hands dirty. Her eyes raked over Josie's body. And look at you. You're a vessel. You're the past. I'm the future. He's just waiting for the right time to get rid of the inconvenience. She gestured pointedly at Josie's stomach. The cruelty was breathtaking. It was designed to shatter her, to make her weep, to make her scream, to make her run from the ballroom in shame. That was the victory Zara wanted. A public abdication. Josie felt the baby kick a hard, sudden jolt, as if he too could feel the venom in the air. That kick, it centered her. It wasn't just her reputation on the line. It was her child's. "You've thought this all through, haven't you?" Josie said. Her voice was shaking, but not with fear. It was with a rage so cold it was close to absolute zero. "From the moment I stepped into the boardroom," Zara admitted, her voice full of pride, "I saw him, and I knew. He was trapped. By his mother, by his name, and then by you. I'm not stealing him, Josie. I'm liberating him. And the company." "Are you liberating that too?" Josie asked, her tone conversational. Zara's eyes narrowed just a fraction, a flicker of confusion. "The company is the man, and I'm his best asset, the Kestrel deal. That's my masterpiece. It's going to double his net worth. I'm giving him the world. What are you giving him? A screaming, messy infant and a wife who's past her prime." "You're so sure of yourself," Josie said. "So sure of your masterpiece. So sure of him." "Of course I am," Zara scoffed. "He tells me everything. Unlike you, I'm his partner. He doesn't hide his late nights from me. I am his late nights." "He's right over there," Josie said, nodding her head slightly. "Why don't we ask him?" Zara's smile was blinding. "An excellent idea." She turned, her red dress swirling, and raised her hand. "Damien, darling." Damien, who had been deep in conversation with Julian Rothschild, looked over. He saw Zara beaming and Josie pale and still, his brow furrowed. This was not the stability he'd asked for. He excused himself and crossed the ballroom. The whispers intensified. The king was approaching the dueling queens. "What's going on?" Damien asked, his voice low and tight. He looked at Josie. "Is there a problem?" Before Josie could speak, Zara slid her hand into the crook of Damien's arm, a gesture of shocking intimacy. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a perfect picture of a damsel in distress. "Oh, Damien, I'm so glad you're here," Zara said, her voice suddenly trembling. "I was just trying to congratulate Josie on the baby, and she flew at me." Josie stared, astonished at the audacity of the lie. "What?" Damien said, looking at Josie with disbelief. "She accused me of the most awful things," Zara said, dabbing at a non-existent tear. "She said I was trying to replace her. And then she said I was trash." Zara turned her face into his jacket as if hiding a sob. "I was only trying to be nice, Damien. But she's so emotional. It must be the hormones." This was the move. To paint Josie as the hysterical, hormonal, jealous wife. Damien looked at Josie. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were cold. He was embarrassed. This was a scene. This was exactly what he'd warned her against. "Josie," he said, his voice a command. "Apologize to Zara, now." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Apologize to Zara. Josie looked at her husband, the man she had loved, or at least the man she had built a life with. He was standing there, his arm firmly around his mistress, who was pressing her face into his tuxedo, her body faking a delicate tremble, and he was looking at her, his pregnant wife, with pure, unadulterated annoyance. He believed the lie. Or more accurately, he chose to believe the lie because it was the fastest way to end the scene. The crowd was rapt. This was better than any Broadway play. The tycoon, the pregnant wife, the stunning VP. They were watching Josie, waiting for her to crumble. "Apologize," Josie repeated. Her voice was quiet, but it carried in the silence. "Yes." "Apologize," Damien snapped, his patience gone. "You are making a spectacle of yourself. Zara is my colleague. She is vital to this company. You will not treat her this way." "Vital," Josie said, tasting the word. "Damien, please," Zara murmured. "It's fine. She's just not herself. Maybe she should go home. Rest." It was the perfect kill with kindness line. She was dismissing Josie, sending the child wife to her bed. Damien nodded, seizing the lifeline. "She's right. You're clearly overwrought." "Markham!" he called out, looking over the crowd for his head of security. "Markham, get the car. My wife is leaving." This was it, her lowest point. He wasn't just siding with the mistress. He was banishing his wife from their own event in front of everyone they knew, all to placate the woman he was sleeping with. He was sacrificing her and their child for the sake of his vital employee. The humiliation was a physical burn. She felt it on her cheeks, in her chest. She saw the pity in Senator Davenport's eyes. She saw the barely concealed smirk on Julian Rothschild's face. She was the fool, the cuckolded, pregnant, hysterical fool. "No," Josie said. Damien, who had started to turn away, froze. "What did you say, Sambour?" "I said no," Josie said. And this time her voice was different. The tremor was gone. It was replaced by the clear, cold steel precision of the lawyer she used to be, the one who could eviscerate a hostile witness without ever raising her voice. She took a step towards them. "I'm not going anywhere, and I will not apologize." "Josie, I am warning you." Damien hissed, his face darkening with rage. "Do not do this. Not here." "Oh, but this is the only place to do it," Josie said. She gave him a small, sad smile. "This is, after all, a night about transparency and charity, isn't it? Let's be transparent." She turned her gaze from her husband to the viper on his arm. "You're right, Zara," Josie said, her voice resonating through the ballroom. The string quartet had officially stopped playing. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. "You are a masterpiece, a brilliant, ambitious, bold woman. You were right about everything. This marriage is a shell. Damien is bored, and he does want a partner who can build with him." Zara's face, which had been hidden, slowly emerged from Damien's jacket. Her expression was one of pure, unadulterated triumph. She thought this was a surrender. "But you made one tiny, fatal mistake," Josie continued. "And what's that, darling?" Zara purred, her confidence restored. "Underestimating you." "Oh no," Josie said. "You didn't underestimate me. You underestimated him." She pointed at Damien. "You thought he was so blinded by, well, you, that he'd become a complete and utter fool. You thought the man who built a global empire from nothing wouldn't notice a $20 million rat chewing on his foundations." Damien's head snapped toward Josie. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about?" Zara's victorious smile faltered. It didn't disappear, but it froze at the edges. "Josie, you're rambling. You're hysterical. Damien, she's the Kestrel acquisition," Josie said, cutting her off. "Your masterpiece, the one you've been working on so closely. The one that's kept you and Damien in late-night sessions, For months. It's a brilliant deal, Zara said, her voice suddenly a half-octave higher. Damien knows. It's going to make you very rich, Josie finished. But not Turner Industries. She looked at Damien. You know, for a shark, darling, you have a remarkable blind spot. You were so busy enjoying the perks of your VP, you never bothered to do your own due diligence. Josie, enough, Damien commanded, but there was a new raw panic in his voice. No, I don't think it is, Josie said. Tell me, Damien, are you familiar with a shell corporation called Vance Holdings, registered in the Cayman Islands? Zara. Vance went white, not pale, not wan. It was the bloodless, stark white of terror. She's lying, Zara shrieked, her hand clutching Damien's arm. She's making it up. She's a jealous, crazy... Am I? Josie said. She reached into her small, elegant evening bag and pulled out her phone. I was a corporate lawyer for 10 years, Damien. I specialized in forensic accounting and white-collar crime. While you were working with Zara, I was doing a little light reading, auditing her Kestrel files. She held up the phone. $20 million, siphoned from the acquisition fund, transferred in 3 separate wire payments to an offshore account. An account that, with a little help from my father's firm, I traced directly to Vance Holdings, sole proprietor house, Dara. The room was so quiet, Josie could hear the ice shifting in a glass 10 feet away. She's trying to frame me, Zara screamed. Damien, she hates me. She hates me because you love me. Damien Turner looked at Zara. He looked at her, and it was as if he was seeing her for the first time. The affair. That was an asset. It was an ego boost. The theft that was a betrayal. It wasn't just a betrayal of his trust. It was an insult to his intelligence. He hated more than anything being played for a fool. Is it true? He asked Zara. His voice was no longer angry. It was dead. No, Damien, baby, listen to me. He doesn't have to listen to you, Josie said. He can just read the email I sent 5 minutes ago, the one I sent to you, Damien, and to your mother, and to the entire board of Turner Industries. And just for good measure, to my contact at the SEC. That was the kill shot, the Securities and Exchange Commission. Zara Vance let go of Damien's arm. Her entire body had gone limp. The blood-red dress now looked like a shroud. You, she stammered, looking at Josie. You bitch. Yes, Josie said, one hand on her stomach. Now, as my husband was saying, I believe you were about to be leaving. The silence that followed Josie's words was absolute. It was a vacuum sucking all the air and warmth from the opulent ballroom. Every eye Senator Davenport's, Julian Rothschild's, Genevieve Turner's was fixed on the toxic triangle at the center of the room. Damien Turner hadn't moved. His face was a mask of cold fury. But it wasn't directed at Josie. It was directed at the woman who had just been exposed as a common thief. The affair was a misdemeanor. This was a capital crime. The SEC, he finally said, his voice a low growl. I had to be sure you'd take it seriously, Josie replied calmly. You seemed distracted. This was the final twist of the knife. It wasn't just that Zara had stolen. It was that Josie had been the one to catch her. The wife he had dismissed as a fragile incubator, a social ornament, had just saved his company from a multi-million-dollar fraud and a PR nightmare with the SEC. She hadn't just outplayed the Mistress. She had outplayed him. Zara, seeing the look on Damien's face, knew the game was over. The man was gone. The job was gone. Her life was over. She went from predator to prey in a single heartbeat. "No. No, Damien, please," she whimpered, reaching for him. "It was a mistake. It was a golden prosciutto. You told me you'd always protect me. You said I was your partner." Damien recoiled from her touch as if she were diseased. "You stole from me. I did it for us." Zara cried, her composure shattering into 1,000 pieces. "So we could have a future. So we wouldn't have to worry about her taking everything in a divorce. It was a desperate, pathetic lie, and everyone knew it. Damien Turner, tycoon, predator, and king, did not yell. He did not scream. He simply lifted his chin. His gaze moving past Josie, past Zara to the edge of the room. His voice was calm. "Markham." A large man in a perfectly tailored black suit detached himself from the wall. Markham was Damien's head of security, a former Secret Service agent who was paid a fortune to be invisible until he wasn't. He and 2 other men, also in dark suits, began to move through the crowd. They didn't run. They walked a slow, methodical, terrifying advance. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. Zara's eyes widened in terror. "Damien! No, you can't do this. Not here, Damien. I love you." "Damien." Turner turned his back on her. He turned his back and faced his wife. He looked at Josie, at her calm, steady expression, at the hand resting on their unborn son. His expression was unreadable. It was a maelstrom of rage, humiliation, and a new terrifying flicker of respect. He had been played by both women, but only one of them had won. "Markham," Damien said again, his voice flat. "Ms. Vance is no longer an employee of this company. She is trespassing. Please escort her from the premises." "Damien, no!" Zara shrieked as Markham reached her. "Ms. Vance," Markham said, his voice as quiet and final as a closing vault. "Please come with us." "Get your hands off me," Zara screeched, batting at his arm. "Do you know who I am? You're a thief," Josie said, her voice cutting through Zara's hysteria. Zara lunged, not at Damien, but at Josie. It was a primal, desperate, animalistic move, her hands clawed, aiming for Josie's face. She never made it. Markham, with reflexes born of protecting politicians, moved faster than anyone thought possible. He didn't just block her. He caught her by the upper arms, his grip like a steel trap. Zara's momentum was stopped so fast, her head snapped back. "Don't touch her," Markham growled, and that was the end of Zara Vance. The 2 other security men grabbed her. This was no gentle escort. This was the title of the story made real. This was the mistress mocked the pregnant wife, but the tycoon's security dragged her out in front of everyone. They didn't just walk her out. They lifted her. Her designer heels, the ones she'd bought with Damien's stolen money, scraped uselessly against the marble floor. She was dragged. Right through the center of the Orion Grand Ballroom, past the champagne fountain, past Julian Rothschild, who watched with undisguised fascination, past Senator Davenport, who looked away as if embarrassed, past Genevieve Turner, who watched with a look of cold, grim satisfaction. Zara's screams echoed off the high, frescoed ceilings. You'll regret this, Damien. You need me, Josie. You barren bitch. I'll kill you both. Her blood-red dress twisted and hitched up her thigh. Her hair, once so sleek, was a frantic mess. She was no longer a shark. She was chum. They dragged her through the grand lobby, past the stunned coat-check girls, and out into the flashing cameras of the paparazzi, who, sensing blood in the water, had surged toward the entrance. Her final screaming curses were cut off as the heavy oak doors of the ballroom swung shut, plunging the room back into a heavy tomb-like silence. The silence that Zara left behind was louder than her screams. The string quartet remained motionless, their bows hovering over their instruments. Hundreds of pairs of eyes which had followed Zara's humiliating exit now snapped back to the two people left standing in the center of the floor, Damien and Josie Turner. Josie stood poised and still, her hand never leaving her stomach. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't cried. She had simply watched. Damien stared at the doors, his chest rising and falling. His public face was a mask of iron, but Josie could see the muscle twitching in his jaw. He was a man who had just had his kingdom saved, and his ego shattered in the same breath by the same person. He turned to her. The room held its collective breath. What would the king do to the queen who had just checkmated him in public? You, he began, his voice a strained whisper. You sent it to the SEC. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. She hadn't just handled a family problem. She had exposed his company to federal oversight. Yes, Josie said clearly, for him and for the listening ears of the board members nearby. Corporate fraud is a serious crime, Damien. I assumed you'd want to be fully compliant with the law. As a majority shareholder, I certainly did. She had just reminded him and everyone that she wasn't just his wife. Through her family trust and her prenuptial agreement, she was a shareholder. She had a stake. You humiliated me, he hissed. You let this thief make a fool of me in my own company for months. You let me make a fool of myself tonight in front of everyone. Did I? Josie asked. Or did you? She finally took a step toward him, closing the distance. She looked up into his cold, furious eyes. The mockery wasn't that she thought the baby wasn't yours, Damien. She said, her voice devastatingly quiet. The mockery was that she thought you were so blinded by your own ego that you wouldn't notice $20 million was missing. And she was right. She paused, letting the truth of it land. You didn't notice, I did. She held his gaze, and for the first time, Damien Turner looked away. He had no response. She had told the truth. He, the great tycoon, had been so busy with the perks of his affair that he had missed a massive embezzlement happening right under his nose. His wife, the one he'd sidelined and ignored, had been the only one minding the store. Josie looked around the room. The guests were frozen. The party was dead. She did not wait for him to dismiss her. She did not wait for his permission. She turned from her husband and began to walk. She didn't walk toward the exit. She walked with slow, regal purpose toward the head table. The table where she was supposed to be seated. She walked past his mother, Genevieve, who looked at Josie with a new, sharp and terrifying approval. Josie reached the table, picked up her own untouched glass of water, and took a sip. She turned to the stunned crowd. Please, she said, her voice projecting with the calm authority of the building's true owner. Don't let a small personnel issue ruin this wonderful evening. The Foundation's work is too important." She then turned to the leader of the string quartet. "Maestro. Vivaldi, I believe. Please continue." The maestro, stunned, nodded. He raised his bow, and the music, shaky at first, began to fill the silence. It was the ultimate power move. She hadn't just won. She had taken control. She had fired the mistress, neutered her husband, and restarted her own party in the span of 10 minutes. Damien Turner was left standing alone in the middle of the floor, the whispers now following him. He was the fool, the one who had been played. Slowly, his fists unclenching, he composed his face. He smoothed his tuxedo. He was a tycoon, and the show must go on. He walked to the head table and sat down, not next to his wife, but 2 chairs down. They sat there for the rest of the gala, separated by an icy chasm of exposed lies and cold, hard numbers. They were the perfect, powerful couple smiling for the cameras. But the room knew. The world would know by morning. Zara Vance was just the opening act. The real fall was that of Damien Turner's infallible image. And the rise, cold and brilliant as the diamond on her finger, was that of Josie Turner. The drive home to the penthouse was a study in pressurized silence. The interior of the Rolls-Royce, usually a cocoon of quiet luxury, felt like a decompression chamber on the verge of catastrophic failure. The city blurred past the tinted windows, the vibrant lights of New York fracturing like shattered jewels through Josie's tired eyes. She was exhausted, the adrenaline of the confrontation draining away, leaving behind the profound, bone-deep weariness of her pregnancy and the hollow ache of her victory. Beside her, Damien was a statue carved from ice. He didn't speak. He didn't look at her. He just stared straight ahead, his hands fisted on his knees, his entire being vibrating with a rage so profound it was for now silent. Josie could feel the heat of his humiliation radiating from him. The only sound was the almost imperceptible click of the turn signal as their driver, oblivious to the nuclear bomb that had detonated in the ballroom, navigated the familiar route home. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was the final agonizing ascent. The mirrored walls reflected the 2 of them, the conquering queen weary and heavy with child, and the deposed king, his armor of arrogance rent in 2. The soft ding, as the doors opened to their private lobby, was deafening. Damien strode into the marble entryway. He didn't wait for her, nor did he help her with her wrap. He went straight to the minimalist glass bar, his movements stiff and economical. The sharp, scraping sound of the crystal decanter stopper being pulled was an act of violence. The glug, glug, glug of the 18-year-old scotch filling his glass was an accusation. Josie didn't follow. She kicked off her heels, the small human act of surrender to her aching feet. She walked past him, her hand on her stomach, and went to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. The view, which had once felt like a cage, now just looked distant. A map of a life that no longer belonged to her. She waited. She had won the public war. This was the private, unconditional surrender. Damien downed the first glass in 2 swallows, the burn in his throat a welcome distraction from the fire in his gut. He poured a second, his hand shaking slightly. He was replaying the night. The SEC. His mother's face, that terrible look of cold, calculating approval directed at Josie. The undisguised pity from Julian Rothschild. The smirks. He was Damien Turner. He was not a man to be pitied. He was not a fool. And yet, "You knew for months," he finally said, his voice a low, rough growl. Josie didn't turn. "Yes. You knew. You sat at my table. You let me talk about our son. You slept in my bed, all while you were sharpening the knife. I was gathering data, she replied, her voice reflecting off the cold glass. Gathering data, he roared, spinning to face her. Is that what you call it? You were building a case like I was some hostile target. You were, she said. And now she turned her eyes as clear and hard as the diamonds at her throat. The moment you brought a predator into your bed, you became a liability to your own company. And as a shareholder, I had a fiduciary duty to protect my investment. And my son's. My God, he whispered, a look of genuine shock on his face. Your investment? Was that all it ever was? This marriage, this child? This marriage, Josie said, taking a step toward him, was a partnership, a sacred trust, and you violated it. You voided every clause the moment you decided my use was finished. You wanted a builder. Zara was right. I am a builder. I just spent the last 3 months building a cage for her, and a very different one for you. He stared at her, the bravado draining away, leaving behind a hollowed-out, defeated man. What did you want Josie to humiliate me, to destroy me? I wanted to survive. She shot back, the first tremor of her own agony, breaking through the ice. You, the great man, were so blinded by your own ego, so desperate for a younger, hotter version of the shark you used to be, that you were handing your kingdom, our son's kingdom, to a common con artist. You didn't notice $20 million was missing, Damien. You were too busy. So I did. He flinched. That was the truth that stung more than the infidelity. The insult to his intelligence. He had been played. She said, he stammered, looking for any weapon he could find. The baby, is it? And Josie's face didn't just harden. It collapsed into a mask of pure, devastating scorn. She physically recoiled, one hand flying to her chest as if he had struck her. Don't you dare, she whispered the words, trembling with a rage that eclipsed his own. Don't you dare for 1 second try to use her poison as your shield, that you would even let that filth into your head, that you would repeat it to me now. It proves you never knew me at all. It proves you are a weaker, more pathetic man than even I thought. He had the grace to look shattered. The last of his anger vanished, replaced by a grey, desolate shame. Josie, I'm sorry. You're sorry you got caught, she said instantly, her voice flat and devoid of all emotion. You're sorry you looked stupid. You're sorry she insulted your intelligence. You're sorry you lost $20 million. You are not sorry for the affair. You are only sorry for the consequences. He couldn't answer. He just stared into his glass, because she was right. I want a divorce, Damien. She said the words landing in the quiet room with the finality of a gavel. A quiet one, an amicable split for the papers. We can blame irreconcilable differences. We will share custody of our son. But you and I, we are finished. He looked up, panic dawning in his eyes. This was not the script. He was supposed to be angry. She was supposed to be weeping. He was supposed to fix this. Josie, wait, he said, setting his glass down, taking a step toward her. We can fix this. The company. My God, Josie, I need you. You saved it. Genevieve, my mother, she called you brilliant. She wants you on the board. She wants you to take Zara's place. Josie let out a short, bitter laugh that was half a sob. Of course she does. I just saved her fortune. She doesn't care who you're sleeping with, Damien, as long as the stock price is stable, but no. No, he repeated, dumbfounded. I'm not interested in being your partner, Damien. I'm not interested in cleaning up your messes. I saved my assets, and my sons. The company was just the battlefield. I am not going to spend the rest of my life watching your back, waiting for the next Zara to come along and blind you with flattery. I'm taking my shares, my son, and my name, and I'm leaving. She started to walk past him toward their bedroom. Josie, he called out, his voice raw with a desperation she had never heard from him. Wait, please don't I get a second chance? She stopped at the doorway, her back to him. She rested her forehead against the cool wood for just a moment, gathering the very last of her strength. Damien, she said without turning, you don't get to cheat and be stupid. I might have been able to forgive one in time, but I can't forgive both. She walked into the bedroom and closed the door, the soft, decisive click of the latch, the only sound. Four months later, the air in the apartment was warm, filled with the scent of lemon oil, fresh laundry, and sweet, milky baby powder. Sunlight streamed through the large bay windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing over the overflowing bookshelves and the old, polished hardwood floors. Josie Hayes, she had taken her maiden name back with a vengeance, rocked gently in a comfortable overstuffed armchair, humming as she finished buttoning her son's sleeper. In her arms, Thomas Hayes Turner, 6 weeks old and perfectly healthy, yawned and stretched. Her new apartment on the Upper West Side was a world away from the penthouse. It wasn't a showplace. It was a home. The divorce had been swift and surgically clean. As Josie had predicted, Genevieve Turner, ever the pragmatist, had stepped in. It was not a settlement. It was a transaction. Josie traded her silence, and all her Turner shares that had doubled in value after she'd prevented the Kestrel disaster, for a cash buyout that was by any standard astronomical. Genevieve had fought to secure the dynasty, a silent acknowledgement from one matriarch to another that Josie had won. As for Zara Vance, her fall had been as swift as it was brutal. Indicted on 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 of corporate embezzlement, her face had been plastered across the Post and the Journal. Facing a minimum of 15 years, her high-priced Turner-funded lawyers had dropped her the day after the gala. Josie's legal team had informed her that Zara, friendless and bankrupt, was expected to take whatever plea the U.S. attorney offered. Josie pushed Thomas's stroller through the crisp January air of Central Park. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. She felt light. She heard the footsteps on the gravel path behind her. Expensive leather-soled shoes, steady and hesitant. She didn't have to turn. Josie. She stopped and turned. Damien stood a few feet away. He looked smaller somehow, thinner. He wasn't wearing his usual armor of a bespoke suit, just a simple dark overcoat and scarf. Hello, Damien. His eyes went immediately to the stroller. He looks healthy. Big. He is, Josie said, her voice neutral. He's a good eater. I brought him something, Damien said, awkwardly. He held out a small, iconic light blue bag. From it, he pulled a small, ridiculously expensive-looking silver rattle from Tiffany's. It was a beautiful, impersonal, and predictable gift. It was his language. Josie looked at the rattle, then at him. It's lovely. You can give it to him on Saturday, Damien. It's your visitation day. 2 o'clock, remember. My nanny will have him ready. The words, though polite, were a clear boundary. He was not family. He was a co-parent with a schedule. Right. Saturday, he said, lowering his hand, looking lost. He cleared his throat. The company. It's stable. The SEC investigation was contained. Your data was meticulous. They're satisfied. Good, she said, preparing to turn the stroller. Josie, wait. I'm in therapy. That made her pause. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw the weariness around his eyes. It was the first truly human thing he had said to her in almost a year. Good for you, Damien, she said, and she meant it. I hope it helps. It is, he said, taking a half step closer. It's making me see a lot of things. About my mother. About me. I was wondering if we, after some time, could find a way back. Josie held up a hand, and he stopped. No, she said, but it was not unkind. I'm glad you're getting help, Damien. I truly am, for your own sake, and for Thomas's. He deserves a father who is present and whole. But I am not a project for you to win back. I'm not an acquisition. I'm done. He nodded, the old tycoon's pride flashing for a second. He hated losing. You really despise me, don't you? After all this? Josie thought for a long, quiet moment. She looked at her sleeping son, his perfect, tiny face, serene, the only good and pure thing to come from the wreckage. She looked back at the man, who was now essentially a stranger. No, Damien, she said, and it was the absolute honest truth. I don't despise you. She pushed a stray wisp of hair from her face, her eyes meeting his. I just don't think about you at all. She turned the stroller. The quiet whir of the wheels on the path was the only sound. She walked away, not looking back, pushing her son toward the patch of bright sunlight ahead, leaving her former husband standing alone, a useless silver rattle in his hand, in the deep, cold shade of the winter trees. And that was the fall of Zara Vance and the rise of Josie Turner. Josie proved that the sharpest weapon isn't always volume, but intelligence. She didn't just get mad. She got everything. What did you think of Josie's revenge? Was it too cold, or was it the perfect response to a double betrayal? She lost her husband, but she gained her freedom, her self-respect, and a new life for her son. Let us know in the comments what you would have done in her position. If you loved this story of drama and consequences, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see a true power move, and of course, subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories every single week. You won't want to miss what we have coming next.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our channel. Today we have a heartwarming story that begins with a quiet airport encounter and ends in the most unexpected way. A millionaire, who never believed in fate, finds himself down on one knee, proposing to the woman who soothed his crying child. The simple act of kindness in a crowded terminal becomes a spark that changes their lives forever. If you're curious about how a tense moment in an airport lounge can lead to a breathtaking proposal on a cliffside overlooking the ocean, you're in the right place. Join us as we dive into this captivating tale, and stick around until the very end to discover how this whirlwind romance reaches a touching conclusion. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring and uplifting stories, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know where you're tuning in from and why you love stories like this one. Donovan Mercer was no stranger to high-stakes situations. He had negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts from penthouse boardrooms, flown across oceans to secure international business deals, and shaken hands with influential people whose net worth soared into the stratosphere. Yet, on a humid afternoon in the bustling airport terminal, he found himself feeling more powerless than ever before. His 3-year-old son, Oliver, was in the midst of a tantrum that no amount of gentle coaxing, rocking, or urgent whispers could quell. Oliver's wailing echoed across the lounge, drawing the attention of agitated fellow passengers who occasionally glanced over with sympathetic or annoyed expressions. Donovan's attempts at comforting his child were as ineffective as if he'd been speaking an alien language, and he began to feel a prickly heat rise at the back of his neck. A businessman a few seats away caught Donovan's eye and gave a tight, disapproving frown. Donovan swallowed hard, a rare flush creeping up his cheeks. He was a millionaire, accustomed to solving complicated problems with swift efficiency, but this, calming a distraught toddler, was one challenge he hadn't yet mastered. Just as his frustration peaked, a soft, measured voice interrupted the chaos. "Would you like some help?" Donovan turned to see a woman kneeling in front of Oliver. Her name, as he would soon learn, was Claire Sloan. She wore a simple pair of jeans, practical sneakers, and a comfortable blouse. Nothing flashy or obviously designer. Yet there was an understated elegance about her, a quiet confidence that belied the humility of her attire. She was all warm eyes and gentle smiles, an immediate antidote to the tension permeating the airport lounge. Oliver's sobs diminished slightly, his little fists easing their grip on Donovan's expensive suit. At that moment, Donovan felt a surge of gratitude mixed with relief, as though he'd been drifting in open water and Claire had just thrown him a lifeline. Claire reached into her tote bag with an air of practiced calm, pulling out a small stuffed penguin with a bright orange beak. She waved it in front of Oliver with a theatrical flourish, as though introducing a tiny friend. "Hey there, buddy," she said softly. "This is Tux. He's great at listening, and he's super curious about little boys who love airplanes. Can you tell him what's making you so upset?" The child's tear-filled eyes flickered with interest. He paused, sniffled, and then, as if transfixed by the plush toy's charm, reached for it with trembling fingers. Claire held the penguin close, guiding Oliver's small hands to pat its soft belly. The meltdown that had paralyzed the lounge finally began to subside into quiet sniffles. Donovan exhaled a shaky breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Looking at Claire, Donovan felt a rare spark of admiration. He was accustomed to orchestrating solutions, not receiving them from strangers. Yet he recognized that only moments earlier, he'd been utterly lost about how to handle Oliver's distress. He nodded in gratitude. "Thank you," he managed, voice low. "I'm Donovan Mercer, by the way." Extending a hand, he noticed Claire's responding smile. "Claire Sloan," she said, giving his hand a firm yet warm squeeze. "And that's quite the little gentleman you've got there." She shot Oliver a cheerful look. For a moment, Donovan's carefully controlled world tilted. Surrounded by a crowd of irritated travelers, he was suddenly aware of a singular calm emanating from Claire. She turned to Oliver again, offering him the stuffed penguin. "You can keep Tux for the flight if you want," she said, gently booping the penguin on the tip of its fabric beak. "He loves plane rides." Oliver, who had stopped crying altogether, stared at her with wide eyes. Then, in a barely audible mumble, he thanked her. Donovan felt something lighten in his chest, some knot of tension unraveling. He looked at Claire, silently wondering if he'd just stumbled upon the one person capable of restoring peace to his carefully curated, but often hectic life. Donovan had never believed in fated encounters or cosmic alignments. He built his empire on logic and data, forging success through relentless discipline and meticulously calculated risks. Yet after the miraculous calm Claire brought to Oliver, he found himself questioning every stoic principle he had once revered. The airport's overhead announcements droned on about delayed flights and gate changes, but he hardly heard them. Instead, he was riveted by the gentle, unobtrusive way in which Claire redirected Oliver's attention, from tears to wonder, with a mere stuffed penguin and a few kind words. By all measures of probability, Claire should have waved goodbye after helping them, perhaps dismissing her act of kindness as a routine gesture. But Donovan felt compelled to keep her near, if only for a moment longer. With Oliver snuggled close, quietly examining the penguin's embroidered eyes, Donovan turned to Claire. "May I at least buy you a coffee? I owe you for—" He gestured toward Oliver, who had nestled against him in weary relief. "Restoring my sanity, if nothing else." Claire hesitated, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. She seemed torn between polite refusal and intrigue. Finally, she said, "It's not necessary. Really, I'm glad I could help. But sure." There was a touch of surprise in her voice, as if she were just as curious about Donovan as he was about her. They found a nearby coffee kiosk in the terminal, where Donovan ordered a cappuccino for himself, a hot chocolate for Oliver, and a chai latte for Claire. While waiting, Oliver spied a giant plastic statue of a cartoon plane. He waddled over in a burst of excitement, pointing at it as though it were a real airplane about to whisk him away on an adventure. As they settled into a small seating area, Claire watched Oliver with the kind of genuine delight that Donovan had scarcely encountered among his professional acquaintances. "He's got such a vibrant spirit," she said. "I can tell he loves exploring new places, even if airports can be a bit overwhelming." Her voice trailed off into a light laugh. Donovan nodded, feeling something warm expand in his chest. "He's my world," he admitted, "and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing most of the time." It was a candid confession, one Donovan rarely voiced. Business dealings, spreadsheets, and strategic planning all lived in neat compartments in his mind. Parenting a toddler defied such rigid control. Claire's expression softened. "Kids are unpredictable. That's part of their magic. I worked in early childhood education for a while, and it taught me that you can't script everything. Sometimes it's better to go with the flow and see the world through their eyes." She offered a thoughtful grin, as though encouraging Donovan to release the tight grip he held on every aspect of life. He took a sip of cappuccino, then found himself telling her about balancing his demanding schedule with single fatherhood. His former partner had relinquished parental rights early on, leaving Donovan to navigate fatherhood alone. Claire listened with an intensity that felt both supportive and non-judgmental. Occasionally, she asked a clarifying question, but mostly she allowed him the space to articulate struggles he'd never even shared with his close associates or friends. In turn, she told him about her love for traveling, describing some of the places she'd visited. From a philanthropic trip to a small village in Cambodia, to a summer volunteering at a children's library in Peru, her stories overflowed with genuine compassion. Donovan found himself hanging on every word, drawn in by the earnest warmth of her experiences. He noticed how her eyes lit up when describing how children's faces glowed at the sight of new books, and he realized that he wanted that kind of gentle enthusiasm around Oliver as much as possible. When an announcement signaled the boarding call for their flight, Donovan was genuinely surprised to realize that 2 hours had vanished in a blur of conversation. Oliver, leaning against Claire's arm, gave a contented yawn. Donovan's eyes flicked to the overhead screen, then back to Claire. "Looks like we're heading in the same direction," he said, trying to sound casual despite the flutter of anticipation in his chest. She chuckled softly, checking her ticket. "Yeah, Gate 24, Los Angeles." Donovan nodded, a small part of him relishing the possibility that fate, or at least a lucky coincidence, was on his side that day. On the airplane, Donovan discovered that Claire had been assigned a seat just a row ahead of them. In one of those twists he would later recount with wonder, it seemed as though someone had scripted this journey with Oliver's well-being in mind. The toddler's pout vanished the moment he spotted Claire slipping into her seat, stuffed penguin poking out of her tote. He pointed excitedly and exclaimed, "Look, Daddy, Miss Claire's right there." Donovan smiled back at him. "I see that, buddy." Oliver's eyes slid from Donovan to Claire, brimming with a curiosity and affection that hinted at how quickly children can bond with someone who shows them genuine kindness. Before long, they found themselves buckling in for takeoff. Oliver clutched Tux, the stuffed penguin, to his chest, occasionally peeking over the seat to see if Claire was still in view. Then, in a moment of either boldness or childlike certainty, he asked if Claire could sit with them. Donovan, never one to indulge random whims, found himself nodding enthusiastically. "If it's all right with Ms. Sloane." Claire craned her neck around, shooting Oliver a playful grin. "I wouldn't mind. Let me see if we can swap seats with someone." It took only a polite request and a small bribe. Donovan offered to buy the occupants in-flight meal, for Claire to move to the seat directly beside them. The moment she settled, Oliver bombarded her with toddler-level questions. Why do airplanes have windows? Where do the clouds go when it's sunny? Have you ever flown a plane? Claire responded with patience and creativity. Windows help us see the sky. The clouds don't disappear, they just move around, and maybe I'll fly a plane one day. Who knows? Each answer elicited a giggle from Oliver, and Donovan watched with cautious fascination, marveling at how seamlessly Claire engaged his son. The flight attendant passed by, offering pretzels and drinks. Claire requested a cup of apple juice for Oliver, then turned to Donovan, arching an eyebrow. You don't get a chance to just relax, do you? He exhaled a low laugh. You caught me. Relaxation isn't in my wheelhouse. I've always got a conference call to prep for, or numbers to review, or a meeting that's around the corner. She shrugged gently, leaning back in the cramped plane seat as though it were a plush chaise lounge. Maybe that's your cue to let go. Just a little bit. Donovan felt a jolt at her words, not in an uncomfortable sense, but in a contemplative one. He had spent his entire adult life securing his financial future and forging a name for himself in the competitive world of venture capital. Time was always a commodity he traded. There was never enough of it to be truly spontaneous. Yet here was Claire, breezing into Oliver's life and by extension, his own, with effortless grace and spontaneity. It was strangely disarming. Oliver dozed off about halfway through the flight, lulled by the plane's comforting hum. With the toddler's head resting on her arm, Claire took the opportunity to gently smooth the hair away from his forehead. Donovan studied her profile, absorbing the soft curve of her jaw, the kindness in her eyes, and the natural ease with which she adapted to caring for a child who, only hours earlier, had been a total stranger. It was more than just skill, it was empathy. Their conversation became quieter, layered with an intimacy brought on by the late hour and the sleeping child between them. She mentioned a brother she adored, a father she rarely spoke to, and her dream of one day opening a community center for children, somewhere they could be safe, learn, and feel genuinely nurtured. Donovan found himself sharing aspects of his life he typically kept locked away. His insecurities about being a single father, the colossal weight of expectations in running a large company, and the gnawing loneliness that often accompanied financial success. When he finally closed his eyes just for a moment, he thought about how improbable it was that this woman beside him, so down-to-earth and quietly passionate, had stepped into his life in the middle of an airport meltdown. When their flight landed in Los Angeles, Oliver was the first to exclaim his relief at being back on solid ground, clapping his small hands gleefully as the plane taxied to the gate. Claire laughed, a musical sound that Donovan realized he wanted to hear more often. As they disembarked, the typical chaos of people rushing to retrieve overhead baggage and jockeying for position in the aisle filled the cabin. Yet amidst that standard traveling tumult, Donovan felt a gentle calm emanating from Claire. Even with Oliver bouncing around, her presence was as soothing as a lullaby. They stepped off the aircraft and followed the overhead signs leading to baggage claim. Donovan mentally braced for the moment he might have to say goodbye and let her walk away, possibly forever. The notion made an unexpected ache bloom in his chest. True, he'd known her for mere hours, but time seemed irrelevant in the face of the genuine connection that had flourished between them. Oliver seemed to agree. He clung to Claire's hand, looking up at her in silent entreaty. "Miss Claire, are you coming with us?" he asked in a tiny, hopeful voice that threatened to make Donovan's chest tighten. Claire offered a tender smile. "I wish I could, buddy, but I've got family I need to visit soon." She looked at Donovan, and he felt the weight of her words. She wasn't brushing them off. She simply had her own commitments. Determined not to lose this moment, Donovan cleared his throat. "Listen, I know we barely know each other, but if you have time, I'd love to buy you dinner, or even just lunch. You did more than keep my son from having a meltdown. You showed me a side of parenting I've been struggling to capture." He noticed a flicker of hesitation in Claire's gaze, but it vanished as she gave a small, genuine smile. "There's a cafe just outside baggage claim," she replied softly. "Maybe we can start with coffee." He nodded, relieved. As they made their way to the cafe, the city's energy pulsed just beyond the airport doors. People hurrying to their next flight, families reuniting, travelers setting out with excitement or returning in exhaustion. In that swirl of journeys converging and diverging, Donovan felt strangely rooted, as if, for once, The direction of his life was about more than spreadsheets and financial forecasts. They found a quiet corner table where Oliver perched on a cushioned seat, sipping on another hot chocolate. Donovan opted for an espresso, while Claire indulged in a caramel latte. The overhead lights flickered softly, reflecting off Claire's features and highlighting the warm hue of her eyes. Donovan watched her from across the table, struck again by her calm self-possession. She explained that she had come to Los Angeles not just to see family, but also to explore the possibility of a new job opportunity, something that might let her combine her love of childcare with community outreach. Donovan offered a small grin. LA has plenty of philanthropic ventures if you know where to look. My company invests in educational programs sometimes. Maybe I could connect you to a few people. He braced himself for the usual flood of interest that surfaced whenever someone learned of his resources. But Claire merely shrugged politely, offering a soft thanks without the eager glint he often saw when people recognized his net worth. It was both refreshing and slightly disconcerting to realize that she wasn't dazzled by his success. Her focus instead shifted to Oliver. The boy had finished his hot chocolate, sporting a telltale chocolate mustache. Claire ruffled his hair. "You're adorable, you know that." Oliver beamed, then curled up against Donovan, lulled by the warm drink and the swirl of airport activity. In that simple scene, hot chocolates and coffee cups, a toddler's soft breathing, and the subdued glow of airport lighting, Donovan felt a flicker of belonging. It wasn't something he'd experienced in a very long time. Over the next few days, Donovan discovered an unfamiliar rhythm to his life. He extended his stay in Los Angeles under the guise of having additional meetings, but in truth, he wanted more time with Claire. Whenever his schedule permitted, he invited her and Oliver on small excursions around the city. They visited an aquarium where Oliver pressed his nose to the thick glass, separating him from the sharks. Claire hoisted him up so he could get a better view, pointing out each fin and tail with a gentle, instructive tone. Donovan, usually racing against time to close deals, found himself lingering with them, enthralled by the look of pure wonder on Oliver's face and the empathy Claire displayed with each child they encountered. In those moments, Donovan recognized how a spark of curiosity could transform an ordinary day into something extraordinary. He also witnessed something else: the way Claire instinctively put others at ease. She chatted casually with families in line, sharing tips on the best spots to see the sea turtles. She guided lost tourists who couldn't decipher the aquarium's map. Each gesture was small but significant, driven not by any desire to impress but by an inherent warmth that radiated from her. After the aquarium, they grabbed dinner at a beachfront cafe. Oliver devoured fish-shaped crackers and giggled each time a gull swooped low over the surf. Claire teased him about stealing the birds' dinner, and Donovan watched their playful back and forth with unabashed affection. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant swatches of orange and pink. The scene felt impossibly picturesque, like a postcard for a perfect day. But with the difference that Donovan wasn't just observing, he was living it. Later that evening, when Oliver fell asleep in the hotel suite Donovan had rented, the two adults found themselves sitting on the private balcony. A gentle breeze rolled off the Pacific Ocean, and the hush of night settled around them. Claire's hair was tousled by the wind, and Donovan noticed again the stark contrast between her unassuming manner and the high-powered circles in which he typically moved. Yet he'd never felt so at ease in someone's company. They talked about deeper things under the veil of starlight. Claire revealed glimpses of her upbringing, a difficult childhood she'd rarely shared with anyone, the fleeting sense of home she felt as she grew older, and her belief that children deserved better than she'd had. Her voice quavered slightly when she mentioned her estranged father, and Donovan sensed raw vulnerability that she tried to keep contained. He responded by explaining how he, too, had grown up chasing the approval of an indifferent family, how success became his shield against paternal neglect. In the raw honesty of that late-night conversation, Donovan realized 4 distinct strengths binding him to Claire and keeping him eager for each new day. First, there was their emotional connection, the sense that every shared story further fused their personal histories. Second, the relatable tension of two adults navigating heartbreak and uncertainty in a world that often demanded polished perfection. Third, the immersive sensory details that turned ordinary evenings into memory-worthy vignettes. The warm fragrance of coffee, the hush of ocean waves, the comforting weight of a child's small hand. And fourth, the authentic character development that saw both Donovan and Claire evolving past guarded exteriors. When Claire set her hand over his, Donovan felt an electric hum at the contact. He curled his fingers to hold her hand more firmly, marveling at the shift he felt in his chest. A few days ago, she was a stranger who halted an airport meltdown. Now she was something far more profound, a companion with whom he could share the unguarded truth of his life. As the final day of Donovan's trip approached, he tried not to dwell on the question he dreaded most. What would happen when it was time for Claire to leave? Oliver had formed an attachment to her so naturally that Donovan couldn't fathom explaining an abrupt goodbye. And if he was being honest with himself, he couldn't imagine returning to a life where Claire wasn't there to exchange amused glances over Oliver's antics or to lightly tease Donovan about his hyper-organized schedule. He caught a glimpse of her, sitting on a plush armchair in the lobby of their hotel, scrolling through her phone to finalize a few plans. The morning light streamed through the tall windows, casting delicate patterns across the marble floors. She looked up and spotted him, giving a small smile that seemed to reflect her own mixture of joy and uncertainty. Donovan stepped closer, his voice low and tinged with concern. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Claire shrugged, pursing her lips. "My family keeps me on my toes, and so does the possibility of a job opportunity I have in mind. But—" She hesitated, eyes flicking to Oliver, who was examining a wall-sized fish tank near the reception desk. "It's harder to say goodbye than I expected." Donovan's heart hammered, both gratified and uneasy to hear her admit it. He reached out and gently took her hand, ignoring the curious looks from passers-by who recognized him from financial magazines. "Then don't," he said simply. Her eyes widened, but he plunged ahead, feeling a courage born of love for his son and a surprising hope for himself. "Stay, at least a little longer. Let's see where this goes." Claire's features softened. "Donovan, you have to understand, I'm not the type of person who can just step into a relationship like it's an afterthought, especially one that involves a child." She took a breath. "When I told you about my own past, it wasn't just an anecdote. It shapes how I deal with attachments." He nodded, aware of the vulnerability in her voice. "I respect that. I'm not asking you to make an impossible promise. I don't want to lose whatever this is before it has a chance to flourish." She shifted, glancing down at where his hand gently cradled hers. "I can stay a bit longer," she said at last, voice barely above a whisper. "But please understand, I'm still figuring this out." Donovan released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That's all I ask." In that quiet moment, a subdued rush of relief surged through him. Even if it wasn't a permanent resolution, her willingness to remain was enough to keep the spark of possibility alive. The rest of the day unfolded like a dream. They strolled along Venice Beach, where street performers juggled neon bowling pins and break dancers spun on flattened cardboard. Oliver clapped in delight whenever he saw someone leap or flip. Claire's laughter was bright as she guided Oliver away from a pair of roller skating musicians who nearly careened into them. That evening, they returned to Donovan's hotel suite, where a simple meal awaited: chicken tenders for Oliver, grilled salmon for the adults, and some fresh fruit. There, in the hushed comfort of a well-lit living room, they talked about how relationships formed in unexpected places. Claire mentioned how strange it was to meet someone she connected with in an airport, of all places. Donovan mused that sometimes you find what you need the most when you're not looking. Oliver, too sleepy to protest, curled up on the couch, Tux the penguin locked in his small arms. As the night deepened, Donovan felt a pang, an understanding that, while she agreed to stay for now, Claire was torn between her blossoming love for them and the complicated life she'd left behind. He had the resources and the desire to offer her stability, but what he truly yearned for was the promise that her heart would remain as well. A week into Claire's extended stay, Donovan found himself on a hotel balcony, the city lights of Los Angeles shimmering in a vast mosaic of neon. He rested his forearms on the railing, letting the mild Pacific breeze wash over him. It was unusual for him to be so contemplative at this hour. He was typically an early sleeper, recharging for dawn conferences or calls with international clients. But tonight, sleep was the last thing on his mind. In the back of the suite, he could hear the muffled hum of a cartoon on the TV, which Oliver was almost certainly dozing through on the couch. Claire appeared at the sliding glass door, stepping out quietly onto the balcony. She wrapped a light sweater around her shoulders, taking a spot beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply observed the glowing sprawl of a city that never seemed to rest. Finally, she broke the silence. "Are you always this pensive at night?" Donovan let out a breath. "Not usually, but these days I've got more on my mind." He turned to face her, trying to convey the swirl of thoughts that threatened to burst from his chest. How quickly and deeply he'd fallen for her. How Oliver lit up whenever she was around. How the idea of her leaving felt inconceivable. But words failed him. Claire offered a small, wry smile. "It's been intense. I never thought I'd form this kind of bond so quickly. Not just with you, but with Oliver." She averted her eyes, voice lowered. "Kids cling to affection, and I'm terrified of hurting him if things don't work out." Donovan placed a hand gently on her arm. "He's resilient," he said, "and we're in this together. You're not alone." She swallowed, and though she nodded, the flicker of doubt in her gaze persisted. They shifted topics, discussing how to handle the remainder of Claire's visit. Eventually, they meandered back inside to find Oliver fast asleep, head lolled against a pile of pillows. Claire carefully scooped him up, one arm supporting his back, the other cradling his head, and carried him to the bedroom's secondary bed. She moved with surety and care, something Donovan couldn't help but admire. Once the child was tucked in, she gently eased the door nearly closed, leaving just enough of a crack for the hallway light to filter in. They found themselves alone in the softly lit living area, both perched on the edge of a plush sofa. Donovan could hardly believe how comfortable he felt in her presence, as though they'd known each other not for days, but for years. Yet the undeniable question lingered. Where would they go from here? The friction was not just about the direction of their budding relationship, but also whether Claire could see herself building a life with him. This man who had a child, a massive company, and a list of obligations that spanned continents. He mustered the courage to speak. "Claire," he started, "I can't ignore how I feel. You've become more than just a passing acquaintance. I want this, whatever it is, to keep growing." Her expression was unreadable for a second, as though she, too, wrestled with words. Then she leaned closer and touched the back of his hand. "I'm still afraid," she confessed quietly, "but I'm not running away tonight. Let's figure it out together." In the hush of that late hour, with only the faint buzz of city life outside, they sealed the moment with a gentle kiss. It was tentative, questioning, yet underpinned by a sweet certainty. Donovan felt the tension ease in his shoulders, as if every burden he carried had just lightened. For the first time in years, life no longer felt like a relentless sprint from one deal to the next. It felt like he was right where he needed to be, in the presence of something real. Morning brought a sudden wave of opportunity. Donovan had a business meeting scheduled in a high-rise near downtown Los Angeles. But as he suited up, he experienced a pang of longing. He wanted to skip the entire affair and just stay with Claire and Oliver. Sense prevailed. The meeting was crucial for a project that could sustain educational programs, an ironic twist given Claire's passion for child development. Maybe, he thought, securing these resources would someday fund her dream of opening a community center. When he left them in the suite, Oliver was enthralled by the cartoon channel, and Claire was flipping through local job listings. Donovan lingered at the door. "I won't be long," he promised. "Afterward, maybe we can all go out for lunch?" Claire nodded, a bright look in her eyes. "We'll be here." The meeting, a swirl of power suits and formal presentations, was a stark contrast to the gentle hours Donovan had spent with Claire. He navigated each agenda item, forging alliances with the same efficiency that had built his reputation as a top-tier negotiator. After finalizing a key commitment from an investor, he found himself smiling for no apparent reason other than the knowledge that something more meaningful than business awaited him back at the hotel. Sure enough, when he returned, Claire greeted him with a radiant grin, wearing a light sundress. Oliver sprinted into his arms, regaling him with a drawn-out story about how he and Miss Claire had invented a game involving pillows and imaginary pirates. Donovan couldn't help but lift the boy high, letting out a deep, sincere laugh that seemed to echo the joy in his own chest. They set out for a cafe near the beach, the midday sunshine casting a golden haze. Oliver dragged Claire forward by the hand, anxious to reach the sand. Seagulls hovered overhead, and the salt-tinged wind toyed with Claire's hair, making it dance around her face in playful disarray. They found a table on the open-air patio, ordering iced drinks and snacks while Oliver happily dug a plastic shovel into the sand at the cafe's edge. At some point, Donovan noticed Claire's gaze drifting out toward the ocean, her expression distant. He reached out and gently laid a hand atop hers. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked softly. She paused before answering. "I've been offered a potential job back home," she said, her voice subdued. "My brother called, saying I should seriously consider it. It's stable, safe." Donovan's stomach twisted. He willed his voice to remain steady. "Are you planning on taking it?" Claire's eyes darted from the rolling waves to Oliver, then to Donovan. "I don't know," she breathed. "Part of me thinks I should go back. Another part of me—" She let her sentence trail off, but he could guess the sentiment behind it. Her feelings for Donovan and Oliver were tugging her in the opposite direction. He swallowed, searching her face. "What if?" He hesitated, glancing at Oliver, who was fully engrossed in building sand mounds. "What if you considered staying with us? More permanently?" She let out a shaky laugh, looking both touched and overwhelmed. "Donovan," she murmured, "I'm not sure I'm cut out for the lifestyle you lead. You've built this giant empire. I'm just me." He shook his head. "You don't see yourself the way we see you. You're everything Oliver and I have been missing." The raw sincerity in his words made Claire's eyes glisten. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against Donovan's shoulder. Time seemed to suspend itself for that moment. Just the two of them, the hiss of the surf behind them, and a child's laughter blending into the natural harmony. In a final convergence of courage, Donovan decided to propose. They'd already shared enough confessions to fill a memoir, navigated a whirlwind of bonding that sometimes takes couples years to achieve, and grown intimately aware of each other's strengths and vulnerabilities. That evening, after a day spent showing Claire and Oliver the city, Donovan slipped away under the pretense of taking a business call. In truth, he made a detour to a small boutique jewelry shop. He wasn't looking for an ostentatious ring. He wanted something elegant but unassuming, something that suited the quiet radiance Claire embodied. He found a solitary diamond in a slender rose gold band, its simplicity reminding him of Claire's honesty and warmth. Back at the hotel suite, the sun had long since dipped beneath the horizon, its final rays leaving the sky a soft lavender. Oliver was in pajamas, sipping warm milk. Claire looked up from the couch as Donovan approached, the faintest trace of concern creasing her brow. "Everything all right?" she asked, noticing the seriousness in his expression. Donovan nodded, then glanced at Oliver. "Bud, why don't you show me that penguin trick you were talking about?" he suggested, trying to ease Claire's curiosity for a moment. Oliver eagerly explained how Tux the penguin could do a flip if you tossed him just right, but the child's demonstration mostly involved Tux landing on his face. Claire giggled at the display, but her eyes never left Donovan. He was standing by the coffee table, nerves running through him in a way no business negotiation had ever elicited. When Oliver scooted to the side for another attempt, Donovan cleared his throat and slipped his hand into his pocket. He turned to Claire, heart thumping so loudly he feared it might echo across the room. "Claire," he began, drawing her name out as though tasting its significance. "I never believed in destiny, or fate, or any of those intangible forces people sometimes talk about. I believed in results, measurable data, success built on logic." He glanced at Oliver, whose curious gaze bounced between them, then looked back at Claire. "But meeting you, watching you calm Oliver at the airport, seeing the way you fit into our lives like you were always meant to be here, I've started to question all of that." Claire's breath caught. Donovan's hand emerged from his pocket, revealing the small velvet box. Her hands flew to her mouth in shock, tears already forming in her eyes. "Donovan, what are you—" His voice trembled, but the words came out firm. "I love you. And I love how you love Oliver, how you make him feel secure and seen. I love the laughter you bring into rooms and the quiet confidence you carry. You remind me that life is more than numbers or success. It's about family and connection. So I'm asking you, Claire Sloan, will you marry me?" Time appeared to halt. Oliver blinked at them, tucks dangling from his hand. Claire's tears spilled over, not in sadness, but in the radiant expression of an overwhelming joy. She nodded vigorously. Her voice, still shaky, mustered a single word. Yes. The moment she said it, Donovan slipped the ring onto her finger, feeling as though a piece of his world had clicked perfectly into place. Claire threw her arms around him, ignoring the tears on her cheeks. Oliver cheered in his childlike way, bounding over to wrap himself around both their legs in a clumsy group hug. In that instant, three distinct lives merged under one roof, guided by the promise of a shared future. They married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony on a clifftop overlooking the ocean. Oliver acted as ring bearer, proudly holding Tux in one hand and a pillow with the rings in the other. Claire wore a simple white gown that fluttered in the breeze, while Donovan, in an understated suit, tried and failed to keep tears from his eyes when she walked toward him. The officiant's words floated on the salty air, mingling with the distant roar of waves. When Donovan and Claire sealed their vows with a kiss, it felt like life had circled around to a point of profound completion. One man, one woman, and one child, forging a family in the most unexpected way. Just as it had all begun in that chaotic airport, where a caring stranger had comforted a crying boy. As the sun slipped below the horizon, Donovan took a private moment to gaze at his new wife, the ring shimmering on her finger in the fading light. Somewhere deep inside, he silently thanked that improbable convergence of fate for bringing them together, proving that sometimes all it takes is a single act of kindness to forever change the direction of your life. Now that you've gotten a glimpse of how a random meeting can blossom into true love, we hope you're as excited as we are to find out every last detail of Donovan and Claire's journey. From one airport meltdown to a life-changing proposal, each twist and turn in their story reminds us that unexpected connections can bring about the most meaningful relationships. Keep listening to uncover how these characters overcame their personal doubts and fears to build a family grounded in trust, hope, and genuine affection. Whether you're looking for a sweet romance or a testament to the power of kindness, this tale has it all. Remember, your support means the world to us. So make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and let us know where you're following from. Together, let's celebrate love in all its wonderful, unpredictable forms.